Hi, and welcome back to the Global Holistic Wellness and Coaching Podcast. This is The Conversation Continues, and today we are tackling jealousy. Okay, so lately this has come up after last week's class in our Global Holistic Coaching Certification course. We were talking about balance and when is enough enough. And then this got into a conversation about, sometimes having feelings about jealousy or attachment. And so we thought we would do a podcast today about this word jealousy that happens to be such a human emotion that I think all of us have had a taste or a visit from the green-eyed monster once in our lifetime, and how to overcome it, how to put it down, how to shake it off. It's a feeling that I think we can all agree isn't pleasant. So let's start by talking about, so in your class this week, what came up and what were you thinking about, this idea of putting down jealousy?
Yeah, well, jealousy, it's so complex, so I'm thinking, where do I begin? Um, if we consider, let's say, the concept from Course in Miracles that all emotions either root back to either love or fear,
Mhm.
then we could kind of take a look at, rooting jealousy back to fear. And I really do believe that, if you root it back, there's either fear of losing something that we're attached to, or
Yes.
perhaps fear of not being good enough or having enough. So I think that's where it would be useful if we began to shine a light in that direction. So what do you do with that? Like, what if you have this sickening fear of losing something that you're attached to? Perhaps, we go right to relationships because a lot of times jealousy does show up, which it also brings up issues of insecurity, self esteem. If we think our loved one might be more interested in someone else, or we might lose them to someone else. So where does that come from? So
I can answer that actually. It's from a
okay,
neuroscience point of view. So
go.
yeah, because I think we had a podcast about fear, and if we haven't, we'll have to go back and add one because I love talking about this. But fear is designed to keep us safe. It from an evolutionary perspective, when we can look at what triggers fear and all of the emotions that come from fear, and jealousy definitely is one of those feelings that comes from fear. It's our studies have kind of shown a couple of things. Number one, that jealousy in the body comes from overproduction of uh, oxytocin, which is also the same chemical in our body that creates attachment and love. And that the theory is that oxytocin, other side, that creates that boost of jealousy is because think about preserving the relationship of, let's say, like your mate. It's your mate, and now this like union, which works to us biologically if we stay connected, especially if we're having children together, right? So that kind of attachment, that possessiveness might be, there's two kind of theories. One is that it could be literally in your brain. There could be an injury or something that happened to you that you produce too much oxytocin in the body, but it could also just be survival, right? So it could just be this evolutionary kind of thing that happens to us to just kind of work towards keeping the human species moving forward. And the reason I think that's important to your question of like, what is jealousy? Like, where does it come from? It's like, why all of this is nice to talk about, a little bit of science and brain science is we normalize it. Then we can feel like, okay, it's not just me. There's not something wrong with me. This is a human thing that happens. There's an evolutionary purpose to this feeling that I'm having. And I don't know about you or listeners, but when I do that, when I kind of talk through it that way, and I'm like, there's an evolutionary, for example, fear. I'm having a lot of fear. This is because my body's trying to keep me safe. Once I start to rationalize it, I engage my frontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that comes in with logic and reasoning, and that helps calm down the system,
Sure. Yes.
activates the
Mhm.
parasympathetic nervous system. So that's part of our jealousy for relationships. Now, jealousy for, let's
Of
say,
wanting mind, wanting. something that somebody else has, that feeling of lack.
Exactly, like social media,
Hmm.
when you maybe are scrolling and you see someone in your life has bought, a beautiful new car or is on this
Right.
amazing vacation or just got
Yep.
engaged, your brain is telling you be happy for them and your body is feeling pretty darn bad. Also I do agree with you. I think that also comes from fear. And I think that comes from fear of not being enough and lack of confidence and insecurity. And
Right.
that one, I just want to say the thing that I love so much is I'm trying to think. Amy Sigil is her name. I was taking a class with Amy Sigil. She's a beautiful dancer out in Oakland, California, very feminist woman.
Yes.
She teaches like female empowerment, and I loved learning and working from her. And she said she was having a conversation because she's quite famous, in that community, in that space. And she said that it was weird when the more successful she got, the less friends she had. Everyone started kind of disappearing. And she started thinking about it this way. And so she started having these conversations with other people in the field who are also getting a little bit of fame. And she said, success is like the ocean, and there's enough for all of us. And as women, if we can get to a space of genuinely feeling happy for other women who are being successful or other women who are gaining, these things that we want, if we can say that like this is a win for us, for females
Yes.
everywhere, and look at it as like just because they're achieving this doesn't mean I can't too. It's like the ocean, there's enough for both of us, and really like opening. And I just love the way she talked about that. So I wanted to put that out there in this conversation because that's the way I see the world too. Is like there's enough good to go around for all of us. There's enough love, there's enough happiness, there's enough success, right? And me, I teach women's empowerment. I very much want to empower other women. So when I see other women in the workplace bringing each other down, it's like collectively we're working against what we want, which is to empower all of us. And if we look at that more holistically to humanity, if we look at it through a Buddhism lens of us all being one, then when one of us succeeds, we all succeed. When one of us finds love, we all find love. So that kind of change of perspective is
Well, I love that. I absolutely love that. So how do we get there? And one of the things that I want to offer is if you can take a look at, Gina, you just used the word holistic. If you take a look at your life in that holistic way, we have like that balance wheel. We have our finances, our relationships, our health, our family, community. And so when we have issues of jealousy in one area, I think it's real important to take a look at the other areas in our lives that we can actually kind of feed. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, because that's how we can create the balance. So it's rather than focusing on what we don't have, we focus on what we do have. And also, it's like not having all your eggs in one basket. So let's say you're in a relationship and you're feeling, possessive and you're feeling jealous because of your own insecurities. If you can build self esteem and self confidence in some other areas in your life, it can help. It can just help, so that, in other words, your whole life doesn't just revolve around the relationship. If you have strong family ties, you have strong community, you have passion for your work, and if you can kind of balance those other areas out, that can help with feeling, so attached in one particular area. So that it's funny how the mind goes. If something happens, what will I do? So if you were to lose, this job, what would I do? When you have strength and you make deposits in these other areas of your life, it can actually help with issues of jealousy. And then one other coaching tip I want to offer is it's a practice of gratitude. And I mean, that comes up in a lot of areas in life. But gratitude can actually help balance out jealousy because, again, it has you focus on what you do have, what's going right. Where you can kind of feel grateful for your own gifts. Gratitude can also build self-esteem and self-confidence. Don't you think, G? Like it's all kind of woven together. And if we're talking about okay, the roots, some of the roots of jealousy, there's a lot. Like I said from the start, it's very complex. However, if we do take a look then we want to say, okay, well, what can we do about it? So those two things that I just gave you, balancing out the other areas of your life, really feeding some other strengths, and practicing gratitude, I really feel like are two ways to kind of overcome or at least balance out
Yeah.
those nasty feelings of jealousy.
Yeah, and I think, and let's not call them nasty. Let's say human feelings of jealousy, because
You're right, because they're
right,
just feelings. They're not
they're
good,
just
bad, right, or
feelings,
yeah,
exactly. And
they
like
don't feel so
to
good,
kind of
but
say, some feelings are less pleasant, is how I like to talk about it. It's like some feelings
less pleasant. I love that.
pleasant
Yeah,
category and some are unpleasant, but they can be useful. And so I always kind of teach and caution against running away from unpleasant feelings right away and trying to just like put it
yes,
like put the fire out. Let's just not feel that thing that I'm not enjoying. And here as I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about that does work in helping to build confidence and helping to kind of change your perspective and thinking. And so that's one of the tools for sure. And then to add to that, we can use jealousy as a signal that we want more for ourselves. So
love this.
right? So
Yes,
like
yes.
let's say the friend just got engaged and we're feeling a kind of feeling inside because we're with somebody who maybe we've outgrown, or
Right.
maybe we know they're not the right person. So we want to kind of get curious about that. Like, what is it that I want that I feel like I don't have, that this
That's
feeling
so
is
good.
shining
Mhm.
light on, right? Or let's say success. Let's say that like our friend, gets promoted and gets this awesome new title, and we're happy for them, of course, but we're also feeling this feeling, and we realize in that moment, I want that too. And maybe before that moment, you didn't know you wanted it. So
Yes.
that can give you kind of a new roadmap to things that you want. So we can actually be inspired by the people who make us jealous if we change our perspective, and they can be teachers for us and they can be guides. And so instead of using that frame of like, oh, I don't like this feeling, this is a gross feeling, let's just like try to disappear it, we can lean into it and get
Yes.
curious about it and use the people who fire us up the most as inspiration. And what a great way to think, right? To say like, I actually realized, when my best friend bought her new house and I felt a certain kind of way, I want to be a homeowner.
I want a new
So I
house.
got to work and I saved up the money and I put down a down payment, and a year later I was a homeowner. Things like that. So that's kind of number one. Number two is, when we're looking at relationships, then we would get curious about, why do we feel unsafe in this relationship if we're having a lot of jealousy, right? And so sometimes that might be indicative of a relationship that is not healthy, somebody who you don't trust, somebody who doesn't make you feel safe, or you don't feel safe to be vulnerable with. Now, it could be that person, and that could be a sign that you might be with the wrong person. But it also could be you, and that's the confusing part. And that's why it's always good to do this work and be in a space of curiosity, because if it's you and you're bringing, betrayal from the past into this relationship, that
Right.
you can't win, right? So
Right.
if you were cheated on or somebody did leave you, of course you're going to feel that way.
Yeah.
You should feel that way. You're justified in feeling that way. But that's why working with a therapist, EMDR can help you with that, when you're ready to put down. But that's a signal that I have this from my past that I'm ready to put down, that is interfering with my current relationship, and it actually has nothing to do with this person. That's one camp. Or of course there's also looking at it, maybe it's not the right person. And then I'm just going to add, before I kind of like toss the ball back to you, the third camp there is building confidence and working through non-attachment and working through, giving that jealousy in a relationship the
Yes.
opportunity to teach you non-attachment and loving with non-attachment, and getting to a place of, I'll call it empowerment, but when we feel like we are whole. And
Yes.
this is how the analogy I use with my clients: when you are the cake and the relationship is just the icing on the cake, but you are a complete cake. You don't need the icing. You don't need the icing. You're the complete cake. So you're not looking for someone to fulfill any hole inside of yourself. That's when you're in a healthy relationship. That's when you're going to have less jealousy, because even if that person leaves you, you're going to be okay, because
Exactly.
you're the cake,
Yeah.
you're the complete cake. So there's a lot of, just like all the topics we talk about, there's not a one size fits all, kind of go to for this. But, what do you think about, the flip side of the coin, looking at it as a tool to kind of like teach you?
Absolutely, I love everything you said. And with any emotions, if we can learn to use them as pointers, pointing us within, like what inside me um, could use some love, could use some healing. So when we can use jealousy, just like what you were saying, G, to look within and see, where we might be out of balance or we might, not be feeling our best. And so, absolutely, that information, can help us and to continue to grow and to heal. You know, well, there's so many aspects of jealousy, but we seem to be targeting, on the relationships, which I do think is, probably key. A lot of my clients over the years have, you know, have dealt with overcoming jealousy, and that everything pretty much that we said as far as building our own self-esteem, building our own self-confidence, and also I'm going to add maybe I will call it a spiritual aspect. However, if you don't like the word spiritual, you could use a more enlightened or more conscious way of thinking. I like to consider, highest and best for all concerned and being in the divine flow. I have this saying to a lot of my clients: if it's meant to be, you can't stop it. And if it's not meant to be, you can't force it. So when we can hold our relationships more loosely in our hand. And I remember when I was a young woman, there was this example: if you put sand in your hand
Yeah.
and you hold it loosely, it stays with you. But as soon as you squeeze it, it slides out from both sides. So love, unconditional love, it's not possessive. It's something that we experience, and we want what's best for each other. And the other thing that I want to add: in a healthy relationship, if you're having feelings of jealousy, it's important to talk about it. And it would be nice to be able to have a calm conversation and
Mhm.
maybe share with your partner your concerns, and even taking responsibility, being careful not to put blame on someone else, because sometimes in the beginning we don't know if it's ours, if we're, like Gina said, if we're taking it from a past relationship. So maybe just offering, hey, I'd like to share some concerns I'm having and some feelings that I'm having, and I'm processing, and see if they can actually help, and talk through it with you. That can be very helpful. And also, couples coaching or therapy is extremely useful. And then taking that more enlightened view as far as becoming whole ourselves, you'll find that when you're full yourself, you're less likely to have feelings of jealousy of what someone else has. It's kind of like after you've eaten a full meal, dessert could come and maybe you're going to say no to it because you're satiated. And that's like life. When you feel full yourself, that you have everything you want, need, and desire in your life, it gives you an opportunity at that point to actually genuinely, organically feel happy for someone else. And the more we can feel happy for others, it's that wonderful energy of what you put out comes back to you. So the more that you are excited and happy for others and their success, you'll find that that's exactly what you attract for yourself. What do you think about that, Jay?
Yes. And I think I get this question a lot about like how I've been married as long as I have, because I've actually been in a relationship now longer than I have been out of a relationship. I've been with my husband
Right.
since college. And probably the best advice, one of the best pieces of advice I can get is around reframing how we see relationships. And for me, I've always seen a relationship as an opportunity to walk beside somebody in life, and an acknowledgement that we may not always walk besides each other. And there's like, it's weird because when you can frame it that way and you're not afraid of the end, which is inevitable, by the way, because one of us will pass away. So we will lose each other one way or the other, or one of us might, we don't know what's going to happen. Life
Right.
has twists and turns. But when you look at it as, I love this person and I'm walking besides this person, and I'm enjoying the time in the moment now that I'm walking besides this person, knowing that nothing in life is permanent. Everything is temporary, one way or the other. Every person we love, we will lose one way or another. And I don't think we talk about that enough in our culture. We're so afraid of losing things that we have that we miss them in the moment when we have them. So that's one way to kind of reframe that, right? And then the other thing I wanted to say based off what you were saying about communication is so important. you know, we don't want to over communicate. So if you're somebody who kind of runs hot and you're always jealous, you don't want to say every time you're jealous, probably. So I would
Good
say that
point.
we do have clients I work with, I'm like, let's not every time you feel that way say something, because that can be, in couples counseling, that can work against us. But if it's coming up for the first time, having a safe space to communicate is key for a healthy relationship. And I want to offer a way you might say something, to your point of, you don't want to attack, you don't want to make it about their action, you want to make it about your feeling, and
Yes.
also educating about your experience. So in the situation where you realize this isn't about this person, I'm carrying it with me from a previous experience, you might say something like, hey, can we talk? I just want to bring you into something that came up for me the other day.
Yeah.
When you were fill in the blank, I
Mm.
felt fill in the blank because of my past experience, and I am working through it. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to let you know right now, like, I'm probably going to need like a little patience and grace, because like I'm still healing. I realize I'm
Right.
realizing this is still a wound for me that I'm healing through. So I just want to let you know. And what that does is put them on notice that when they talk to other people in front of you, or put their hand on the back of somebody and kind of touch them, it makes you feel a certain way. And two things can happen in that situation. Either they don't do that anymore because they don't want to cause you pain, or they do. And either way, you can be grateful for that, because they're showing you who they are if they continue with the behavior, and they're
Right.
showing you that they didn't hear you. So either way, it's win-win for you, because you're giving them the opportunity to change and also hold space for you to change, or you're giving them the opportunity to show you who they are, which saves you time. So either way, I think that's win-win.
I think too, just as we're coming to a close here, just to round out, jealousy now, let's just touch back on, jealous of the new car, or jealous of, what somebody else has. That's again going to be important for you to do your own personal inventory. We all have our gifts, and we all have something, and it's going to be important for you to recognize the wanting mind. And this we did cover, in class about, the wanting mind just wants to want. As soon as you get what you want, it just goes to what's next. So kind of getting into the difference between want and need. I think most of us, living in this day and age, most of us have our basic needs met, as far as
Mm,
like food, shelter, our survival needs are met. And so then after that, I'm going back to Gina, you saying, the cake versus, the frosting on the cake. I think most of us have the cake, and recognizing that a lot of the things that we're jealousy, that we're experiencing jealousy, or that we're feeling jealousy about, is really that wanting mind, just that phenomenon of craving, and getting in touch with that, the difference between want and need, and then doing that, personal inventory, and perhaps checking in with, outside our like little neighborhood. When we start to take a world view, most of us have so much more than people on the, in the planet.
yeah.
If you even just have a car, it's it's, the majority of people on the planet don't have a car. So if you can start to consider these things, running water, and really kind of dialing it back, and pulling that wild pony, the mind can be a wild pony, pulling the reins in and kind of focusing on all that you do have, is also definitely a cure for that, wanting mind, and getting a little bit more clarity, and starting to feel more appreciative for what you have. I just wanted to end with that. So I think we covered a lot. I know we could keep going.
Well, a couple of things. One, that could be a whole nother podcast topic in
Yeah,
terms of
the wanting
material
mind. Yeah.
material possessions, and in our
Yes.
culture too. When is enough enough, for sure, 100%. Maybe we can get into that next week. And then the cake analogy, yes, we probably are all have the complete cake materialistic possession wise, but in just making sure I clarify that cake analogy, you may find that in this work you're not complete, meaning like you haven't worked through a previous experience. That's more of like a emotional or abstract
Yes.
concept. And
Yeah.
so just making that sure, like
Yeah.
sometimes we have to rebake the cake because sometimes we realize we bake the cake without eggs, or we bake the cake
And
without milk, or we bake.
sometimes we want different
Yeah.
ingredients.
Sometimes we
I
realize
love
we
that.
want to be a carrot cake, and all this time we want a chocolate
Love
cake.
that.
But whatever the case may be, like we have the opportunity every day to be our complete version of ourselves,
And reinvent ourselves.
and reinvent ourselves and look at our areas of growth for us abstractly, where you were talking about materialistically, which I love. And actually I just taught a class this week on minimalism and attachment to
Yeah.
objects and how that can cause more
It's all
strain
tied in.
and anxiety. And so that
All
could
tied in.
definitely be something that's coming. And I do want to plug our self-love class. We do have a online self-love workshop that is 100% virtual and really goes over some of this, how to become your complete cake. We have our 21 days for transformation program too, which is also going to help you become your complete cake. And then of course we have our next 8-week course coming up in August. So if that's something that you're interested in, really not only becoming the best version of yourself, but maybe inspiring other people to do the same, that's something you're going to want to check out on our website at www.globalholisticcoaching.com. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. I just had to comment that when we started, you used the color green for jealousy, which for some reason the color green is associated with jealousy.
Monster.
But it's also funny because the fourth chakra, the color is green, and so these emotions that are so interesting. But you and I did not talk about this. We just both happened to be wearing
We did.
green today.
We chose green, and we knew we were covering jealousy today. So subconsciously,
I didn't consciously pick green. I did not.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, because let's have our viewers, if you're listening to us, you don't know that we're both matching. Again, this is something that keeps happening to us. But if you're viewing us, this is not intentional. We never plan our outfits. Just for some reason, we are always wearing the same color.
It's the mother-daughter energy connection.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength. We're on the same page. You get this. So if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you guys. As you are starting to see a pattern, we get our material from the awesome questions we get from you. So you can
We'd love some comments. How do you deal with jealousy?
Yes, tell us how you deal with jealousy. Tell us what makes you jealous, what works for you. And if you want to keep it private, you can go ahead and email us at globalholisticcoaching@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.